Hello, everyone. So welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Jacob, and I'm really excited to share with you guys my initial take on this book, Designing Your Life. So one of the things that I've been doing recently is reading every morning. And the book that I've been fortunate to just come across because it's quite an inspiring book is called Designing Your Life. And I will highly recommend the book so far. Right now heading to I'm almost halfway through the book and I'm heading to chapter 7, How Not to Get a Job. And it's a very interesting book. It has very practical tools in it that kind of helps you address certain problems that you face in life, in career, or when you face an obstacle. But I think the most important thing is it gives you an opportunity to reframe your life and not just, in a sense of like, how should I think differently, but actually it's a very applicable, action-based, exercise-focused book. And I think something that was really interesting about it is it actually identifies some of the nuances that exist within uh, each individual based on the examples that were given. At the same time, it also acknowledges the importance of being uh, um, being cynical, but it also offers that opportunity to be hopeful, even in the midst of that cynicism that you face when you're always trying to, you know, take the next step of doing something different or trying to, reframe your life in essence, right? I think some of the things that really stood out for me. Uh, so right now, I'm in this chapter that's focused on prototyping, right? How do you prototype different solutions in addressing certain problems, especially when it comes to career? Because one of the things that the book focused on is, um, career spend a lot of time, about 20% of your time on earth in your job, right? And one thing that they're trying to help you is to prototype different ways of figuring out what career is ideal for you. And something that really stuck out for me, and a couple of quotes here is like on page 159, it said, "Life design." Sorry, 159. Um, so this is an interesting one. Page 165, it says this is about prototype conversations, live design interviews. And something that he said here was most people fail not for lack of talent, but for lack of imagination, right? I think that's kind of self-evident, but I think what is really important is that, and this chapter is all about prototype. And what he said is that one of the things that we really fail to understand is we actually have to talk to people, have to network with people and broaden our horizon for us to actually be able to apply the principle that you mentioned here, or the kind of the theme that is mentioned in the book, is how to become a designer, how to think like a designer, which requires an open-mindedness. It requires a lot of brainstorming, but not action-based brainstorming, and it also requires a lot of, you know, providing yourself with different perspectives, right? And in this chapter, I think what was helpful is that, and I'll give a specific sentence in this chapter that I kind of stuck with me was on page 169. It says, "You won't buy a car without a test drive, will you? But we do this all the time with jobs and life changes, right? There is this element of how do we go about these transition phases in life? How do we go about, finding the right job for us? And we just jump into stuff, right? Maybe based on our cultural background or based on how we're brought up or how what we were exposed to, we tend to give preference to just certain preconceived ideas of what we thought uh, the way things are supposed to be done, and we just go ahead and do it. We go to grad school, we apply for that cushy job without going there asking people who work in that space to learn more about it. We go to grad school without really thinking about how does grad school factor into that ideal version of our life. And this chapter pretty much gives advice for you to reach out to people and do what they call design interviews. And design interviews is literally going out there, finding people, and having like a 30-minute cup of coffee conversation and asking them like, how is it in your life? How is it like in your career? And just having a very genuine conversation with someone who you aspire to be. Not necessarily like an interview, which you focus here on. Like you should not go out in request for asking for interview because people might think you're looking for a job, but to give you guys, but just to have that conversation to figure out how is the person's life, how is the life in that job. And I think this is very striking to me because sometimes we get into things without really asking people who are already in that space. And one thing that this book really encourages, and I think it's something that comes brought a little bit later, but this book requires some collective reading because there's a lot of exercises in the book that you have to really kind of work together, share with others, and kind of do it as a community because it kind of helps kind of demystify some of this concept. It also helps like a support system for one another. One thing that was also very interesting about the book, which I'm trying to get right to, so fascinating, was chapter 5, Design Your Lives. And they talked about this thing called Odyssey plans, right? Like, and the best way that they put it was, you have to design 3 lives for yourself. And the book highly encourages that you have multiple lives. You don't have this one fixated life that you have to just forged for. People always think when they face a roadblock in life, they have to, everything's over. But I think this book says you have this multitude of lives, and you really have to, you know, um, be creative in your thinking, but also think about your life as um, like this, like a painting, right? And you can paint it anyhow you want, right? It's not just like this fixated step-by-step process that you have to take. And something else interesting is like in one of the exercises, they say you should design 3 types of life you want. The first one is that thing you do, right? That thing you do that means that sometimes already centered around your mind, sometimes already exists in your current life, and you just want to build on that. There's this hard idea you're trying to work on. You want to build on that idea moving forward, and you just want to make that thing work. Or that's the first option. The second life that they mentioned, the life two, is that thing you do if the thing one was suddenly gone. So that in reference to life one, if life one is not available, what will be your second choice? Right? And not to say one is a backup for the other. They highly emphasize in the book that these 3 lives are not like, if one fails, the second one doesn't work. You go for the second one, and the second one doesn't work, you go for the third one. But these are parallels that um, as equally important or as equally feasible, right? So it's not just, this plan A, plan B, plan C. And I think life two is very important because it says, what if what you have been banking on in terms of just convenience or accessibility doesn't work? What will be your second life that you go for? So it's kind of elaboration that says some kinds of work comes to an end. Almost no one makes boogie whips or internet browsers anymore. The former are out of date and the latter are given away free with your operating system. And so just imagine that your life, one idea is suddenly over or no longer an option. What will you do? You cannot make a living. You can't do nothing. What would you do? If you're like most people we talk with, when you really force your imagination to believe that you have to make a living doing something other than doing that you think you do, you come up with something, right? Kind of saying that what is that thing that if that reality that you think you have is not there, no longer there, what are you gonna do? And the last life, which I will just quickly iterates, like that thing you do or the life you live, if money or image were no object, right? So if money or image was not an option, was something that you do that you won't think about making money, or you won't think about having fame, or you won't think about being laughed at, being discouraged by people, that sometimes opinions doesn't really matter, right? That in essence, it's very important, right? So I think the book actually gives a lot, and I think this example was really, really helpful and it's under chapter 5, and it says embrace your multiple personalities too, right? Because in part of designing this life, you have to also be cognizant that you have multiple personalities. There's not one definite uh, version of you that is just basically focused just on yourself as you, but also how people define you based on your job and all that. But you are actually a representation of different experiences, multifaceted as you are, and you have to incorporate that in your job. So I thought, chapter 5 was very interesting as well. Something that I would just, and two important things that I'll just go back just to iterate. There's something that they mentioned in the book. It's called the tool. So the premise of the book is saying that design your life is an equation. Design your life is finding the right problems plus addressing it with the right solutions. And sometimes finding the right problem is difficult because we get stuck in two types of problems, which the they said in this book. One is called the anchor problem. So these are problems that just don't go away and you've been thinking about them for a while, right? How do you, figure out those problems? And the second one that they mentioned in the book is called gravity problems. So gravity problems are problems that you can't do anything about it, right? Um, certain problems that it's just what it is, right? And you have to design your way around it. And I think gravity problem is the one that sometimes we get stuck in life about. We want to fix things that we can't fix, and but the key is identifying that it cannot be fixed, but we can work our way around it. And it's and I think that's the essence of how you can actually out innovate or out design, specifically in this case, your way out of it and design a life around that problem. So based on that formula, navigating gravity problems, navigating anchor problems in this case are problems that it's just, you know, problems that won't go away. And, one problem that they mentions here is that, um, maybe there's something that intrinsically, um, but the thing about anchor problems is that it's doable. You can actually address the problem. It's feasible. There's a solution out of it. But um, it's just that thing that has been nagging you for a while. So I think the one example in the book that he gave was that, there's this guy called Dave, and you know, Dave found himself with an anchor point, but he didn't have to do his career. This problem hit closer to home. You see, Dave is a shop kind of guy. He had a workshop. So Dave was this guy that had a workshop. Um, but he was not necessarily a workshop guy, right? He was more of a craftsman because he had taken over the shop from his dad. Um, and his dad, Dave the third, and but Dave himself didn't feel like he had to be like his dad. And one of the things um, that he found out was that there was this thing that he was forced to do because his dad had this, uh, you know, this shop that he had to do all the things that have to come with the shop. But he himself was more of a craftsman. He was more interested in the artwork, not necessarily managing that, the maintenance and the careful planning. You know, and running the garage was not something he was into. He was interested in the specific job requirement of being a craftsman, and that was something that nagged him for the rest of his life. And I mean, the other specific anchor problems that came as a result, and it's just like problems that you think that are doable. It can be habit problems, it can be problems of behavior, but these are problems that you can really figure out what is it can be a problem of circumstance in case of Dave, just based on the circumstance you're born in. But these are problems that you really have to identify, but they are doable. And I think that's what design thinking, which is something the premise of this book shows opportunities for that. And they give you in three ways. One, reframe so that the goal is just a workbench and insight. Reframe the problem. And actually give yourself the opportunity to figure out a way um, to focus on what you care about, what you're passionate about within that problem, and tentatively might be able to come up with something that's doable. So that's a very interesting one. I think the last thing I would like to share is about um, something that really got interesting was chapter 4. It was, so I'm sorry, I'm going backward, but chapter 4 was there was this thing saying getting unstuck. And I think sometimes most of us are in a position where we feel stuck. But something that the book really iterated in this on page 108 was that you really need to learn how to ideate around ideation is key, and not just like writing the ideas, but actually going out there and generating a lot of ideas, right? But making sure that you go in action and just try many things out there, like expose yourself and learn, just do like write a lot of ideas. Don't pick the first idea, but do a lot of ideation. And ideation really means that you do a lot of mind mapping, which is like, there is hobbies or activities that you're really excited about. You can pick a word at the center of this mind mapping and just like write as much as possible just words that are from the center word, but come up with so many ideas that you can really get yourself out of that way of thinking or out of that situation you're trying to think. And sometimes the book mentions that two types of ways to identify what you're really passionate about. It has to be very engaging and it has to give a lot of energy, right? And those two aspects are very critical as you're doing this ideation, because this ideation, you want to figure out activities that really gets you excited and really gives you energy. And from there, you're able to come up with a career, hopefully, that is centered around the ideation phase. And the book has some really great exercises to help you navigate the mind mapping, navigate the ideation, build on a journal that can help you find activities that are engaging and as well as providing really good energy, which then leads you to some good ideas of how to uh, start thinking of what career really fits into your into who you are, and maybe that's a place to start. Because one thing the book mentions is that they want to make sure that they just want to take the next step, not necessarily like, oh, what you're gonna do in the next 5 years or the next 10 years, 20 years. Like, how can you just get out of this situation to the next situation? Um, and so yeah, it's a very interesting book, and I think um, it provides a lot of activities that can really help you start thinking about design thinking. How can you design your life? What are the tools which is provided some exercises here on how to really find something that's giving you energy, giving you engagement, and those are the activities that you need to be working on, which then gives you the life purpose, which is a process. So life purpose is a process, and the book clearly emphasizes that. So you should not feel like you need to come with this grandiose solution at the end of the book, right? It's all about starting somewhere you are, and the book mentions a lot. You are here, and from there, you are here. It goes now into figuring out your life work view, which start gives you that vision of what if that is a synergy between your life and what it gives you that direction, not necessarily the destination, the direction of where to be heading towards. But you are here, design what you have, think a lot of creative ideas. Don't focus on the first one. Network with people, which is also emphasized in the book. And I've not got to that chapter yet, but you said networking a lot, doing a lot of design interviews, where it's not an interview necessarily, it's a design conversation with people that you want to really be like after you've done your work journal, you've done your mind mapping and all that. But I think this is very exciting book because it's very practical, very applicable. It touches on a lot of issues that we go through in this our generation and in the way things have shaped in a society where we go to school and we don't have anything that matches to our job career. We have this engagement between who we are, core values of our life versus our worldview, lack of synergies as a result of that. And there's a lot that comes into just this uncertainty that I think the approach on design thinking here is really critical. So just to close it, one of the things that I mentioned earlier in the book is our goal for our life is rather simple: coherency. We just need coherency, and a coherent life is one lived in such a way that you can clearly connect the dots between three things: who you are, what you believe, what you're doing. And one of the things that he mentioned in the book is building that compass that guides you, that gives you the power to cut the deals with yourself, that you can see the connections of who you are, what you believe, and what you're doing. You now have developed the course, the careful compromises that you need to make some major cost reductions. So, great book. Not finished reading it yet, but it's very fascinating. And I think the authors of this book, both at Stanford, have been able to work with several students, carry people in their later stage of career, even older folks, on how to start designing their life. And very last thing, one thing I'll just say is this one thing that was mentioned page 53 that it really touched me. He said most of people now, especially with the pandemic and all that, are struggling to find where they are. And the book clearly states that there's this dysfunctional belief that you should already know where you're going. But one thing that the book really emphasizes that you can't know where you're going until you know where you are. You have to know where you are now before you know where you're going. And I think that really stuck with me, and something that the book is a very good way. It helps you to really first identify that you're here and start gives you direction from where you are and start for you to feel present and work from there. Great book. I think the authors were very precise when it came to relatability, like especially with our current climate, and making sure that you don't get overwhelmed by just feeling disengaged from a content like this that always says, "Oh, design your life" and all that. But they're actually very cognizant of the fact that they had to write something that centers around practical tools, identifying where you are, building that mind mapping that is around the center around also like your compass helps you direct yourself to a certain position, but also knowing that you have to start from somewhere. So I hope this was a very helpful tip. Design your life. Great book. Highly recommend it. Such an easy read. I'll say you have to do with others, because some of the exercises you need to share with others so people can know, can give. No, I mean, I think it will just be more engaging and actually will build on some of the, some of the experiences that 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 as you are doing exercises, you help you really ensure that you are on the same page with others. So the book was written by Bill Bonnet and Dave Evans, Design Your Life, How to Build a Well-Lived, Joyful Life. And I think so far they've been doing a great job trying to give people that, me specifically, a better idea of how to design my life. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this review was great to you. And please, you can subscribe to his channel, like or comment if something's interesting to you. I talk about emerging markets, finance, books like this, and other interesting stuff that center around entrepreneurship and finance. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please, love to hear from you. And you can also send books that are exciting to you that I'd love to read as well. And please check out my school, Pre-Entrepreneurship School, the peschool.com. We teach about entrepreneurial tools and resources for people to have fulfilling life. We do have meditation sessions, Mandarin learning, finance education, and other interesting workshops that might be exciting to you. So love to hear from you, and thanks for stopping by. Take care, everyone. Bye. See you in the next video.